Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. On behalf of Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today for the Tennesseans for Solar Choice webinar. My name is Alyssa Schaefer, and I'm the Solar Communications and Policy Manager for Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. You can always learn more about us at cleanenergy.org. And now, before we get into the fun Tennesseans for Solar Choice information, I do want to just take a quick minute to go over the basic functions of the WebEx control panel, which you will see on the right-hand side of your screen, just so you know what you're looking at and how to ask questions and interact with the webinar as it's going on. To ensure sound quality, all attendee lines will be muted throughout this whole presentation. Go ahead and find the 3 buttons along the top of your control panel, and if you're having any trouble or hearing or seeing the slides, you can always click the blue chat button and type in your problem at any time so that we can help you troubleshoot and you can participate in the webinar. We do have a big chunk of time saved here at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So at any point throughout the presentation, if you think of a question, you can simply click the question mark button on the top of your screen and make sure all panelists is showing up in the drop-down menu, and then simply type your questions into the text box. We'll be collecting them as we go throughout the presentation, and then at the end, we will do our best to answer as many of the questions as possible. And with that, I will turn it over to our Executive Director, Stephen Smith, and we'll get started.
Let's make sure I'm unmuted. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, sounds great, Steve.
Okay, excellent. So again, thank you everyone for joining. I know people are busy, and I really appreciate, and our organization appreciates everyone taking time during their busy schedule. My name is Stephen Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and we are a regional nonprofit environmental advocacy and energy policy organization that does work throughout the Southeast. And we have a long history of doing work in and around the Tennessee Valley Authority. And this campaign that we are talking to you about today is sort of a homecoming for us. We've done a lot of work on solar in other parts of the Southeast. We've run some pretty aggressive campaigns before, but we have historically felt that we've been able to work well with TVA in the past. Unfortunately, several policy changes and initiatives that they are undertaking right now are causing us a great deal of concern. And we're also seeing some regional trends that we'll talk about over the course of this call that are causing our region in the state of Tennessee to fall further and further behind in what is a tremendously dynamic and very important technology sector that is growing clean, renewable energy, particularly solar power. So this, what we're going to talk about today is some of our thinking on that, and we're going to talk about ways that you can become part of a very exciting campaign to basically help educate the public more about all the multiple benefits that come from using, God's gift to the planet, which is the tremendous solar power that we have raining down on us every day, and all the multiplying benefits from economic development to environmental benefits to actually helping making the grid more resilient and diversifying our energy mix that come from having a robust solar market that is fully functional in the state of Tennessee. So let me ask for the next slide. So just to level set, make sure everybody's on the same page, the Tennessee Valley Authority is a large federal corporation that is also a federal monopoly. They do not have any competitive pressures. They are the nation's largest public power entity. They generate and transmit power into 7 southeastern states, of which Tennessee is the one that they serve the most of, and they literally serve about 99% or approximately that amount of the Tennessee state market for electrical power. And they have an interesting platform. They are largely a generation company and a transmission company that provides power to 154 local power companies across their service territory in these 7 southeastern states. And they also have a number of direct serve industries where they actually bypass the local power companies, and they have direct contracts, and they provide retail electrical sales to very large industries and some federal facilities. These local power companies are made up of a combination of both municipal power companies and co-ops. Let me ask for the next slide. And you're not going to be able to see this very clearly, but in the state of Tennessee, there are a number of different co-ops and municipal power agencies that basically serve as local power companies. And some of you will know them. The biggest is Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, Nashville Electric Service, Knoxville Utility Board, the Electric Power Board in Chattanooga. Those are some of the bigger ones. But you also have some big players like Middle Tennessee Electric, Duck River, Volunteer, which are cooperatives. And so these entities are actually the local power company that you interact with. It's who you write your bill to. Interestingly, the Tennessee Valley Authority has an all requirements contract with each of these entities, which forces them to, the local power companies, to have to buy all of the power from the Tennessee Valley Authority. There are active conversations going about providing some flexibility in that contract, but it is not moving forward. Those conversations have been going on for decades. And so the local power companies are held hostage by the federal monopoly that refuses to give them choice in their ability to buy power from other sources or generate their own power. And we'll talk later in the slide deck about why that is so critical. So when we talk about who controls the uptake and the movement in the solar market in the state of Tennessee, it's first and foremost the Tennessee Valley Authority as a federal monopoly who is self-regulated. They have no outside regulatory oversight. Their 9-member board, which is appointed by the President of the United States, is their regulator relative to how they set rates and set policy. They are, in essence, a monopoly that is self-policing, that has no regulatory control over it whatsoever. And they then control the local power companies, which then are in varying degrees looking at different options for how to interact, but they largely keep a very strong thumb on the local power companies about what the local power companies can and cannot do. That's not to say that all the local power companies are chomping at the bit to get out from underneath TVA, but it is an interesting debate that we'll talk a little bit more as we go on, because much of the power generation for solar is going to take place on what's called the distribution network, which means it's going to take place at the level of the local power companies. So this creates an opportunity for us to have a very robust conversation about how we should produce and consume energy in the state of Tennessee. So let me now hand it off to Brian Jacobs. Why don't we advance the next slide? Who's going to talk a little bit about where we are with Tennessee with some analysis comparing it to some of our other regional states. Brian?
Great. Thank you, Steve, and thanks everybody for being here. My name is Brian Jacob. I serve as the Solar Program Director for SACE, and so it seems appropriate that I would offer some solar-specific context about Tennessee to get us started. At the beginning of this decade, Tennessee was among the leaders in the Southeast. We tend to use a metric of watts per customer, which allows us to compare and contrast states and utilities within the region. And if we look at just as recently as 2015, Tennessee had more solar watts per customer than even Florida did. Since then, however, other states have moved ahead and Tennessee really hasn't. The second bullet there shows that a different ranking from the SEIA, the Solar Energy Industries Association, ranks Tennessee as 25th, so right in the middle of the 50 states in terms of total solar installation. Then from an economic development standpoint, I've pulled a statistic from the Retail Industry Leaders Association, or RILA, where they have ranked states according to the flexibility and opportunity that they present for corporations that are trying to buy clean energy. And that ranking shows Tennessee very near the bottom, 44th out of 50. And it's very important because almost half of the companies in the Fortune 500, 48% was the last ranking, have made some kind of climate commitment or clean energy commitment or both. And essentially what this says is that those companies are not finding it convenient to meet those needs in Tennessee. So our basic conclusion is that Tennessee is falling behind other states of the Southeast. I have a couple graphs that I'll use to illustrate that point. So Kyle, if we can go to the next slide. I'll preface this by saying that SACE is a very data-driven organization. For example, we use data extensively for our internal purposes when we're informing our policy positions, for example. But I'm in the process of assembling an external report on solar in the Southeast. And that's what these two graphs come from. And I will point out that they are preliminary. We're actually waiting for an additional data set from the Energy Information Administration before we finalize and publish. So you're getting a preview of these. And this first one really shows the trajectory of each of the 7 southeastern states where we focus. They're in 2-year increments from the period 2015 through 2023. And I can come back to this later if you have specific questions about this slide, but I really just wanted to put it in here to show where Tennessee stacks up. They're far down on the right side of this graph. Kyle, can you go back quickly? Tennessee is very far down on the far end of this graph. Only Mississippi has less solar installed than Tennessee, but this is in absolute megawatts. And so if now we switch to the next graph, I'll position it in terms of watts per customer, that kind of equitable and unbiased metric that I mentioned before. And here, this year, Mississippi jumps ahead of Tennessee, and they actually jumped ahead of other states as well. And then projecting out through 2020, as we've done here, Mississippi will stay ahead of both Tennessee and as well as Alabama. But Tennessee will be trending along there with virtually no growth. Apparently, flatlining at around 100 watts per customer, and apparently comfortable with that. Now, the unsubsidized cost of solar has fallen dramatically, some 85% since 2009. It can compete with any technology that's out there, but it almost seems like TVA didn't get that memo. Not only are they, TVA, not doing much themselves, they're actively trying to prevent you from doing much solar either. And what we need is for TVA to hear loud and clear that Tennesseans want more solar. So with that as context, I will invite Steve to take the reins again and introduce Tennesseans for Solar Choice.
Okay. Kyle, can you advance the next slide? So what we are interested in doing with a number of partners and with all of you and with everyone who cares about markets, economic development, the environment, and healthy choices for our children's future, we are launching Tennesseans for Solar Choice. which is going to be a very diverse and multi-partisan effort to work to remove market barriers and enable the expansion of all the market segments. Remember, in solar, it's easy for someone to get focused on any one market segment, whether it be the rooftop residential market or community solar or large utility scale solar or something in between that is serving more a commercial marketplace. We believe that it is appropriate that all the market segments be functioning in a healthy way, and that we think it is imperative that no monopoly power can use their monopoly position to limit the a successful and robust transaction of the solar market at any level. And so Tennesseans for Solar Choice is an effort to identify those barriers and work vigorously to knock those barriers down. Next slide, please. The initial coalition that is in configuration to launch this will be Conservatives for Energy Freedom, which is an organization that works across the country and particularly in the Southeast, which are conservatives that believe very strongly in free market. They believe in competition. They believe that monopolies should not be holding back innovation. They believe in customers having choice. The NAACP, which is an organization that has been championing for decades the rights of African Americans and the ability to have fair treatment of all segments of the marketplace, where African Americans are not discriminated against in pricing structure or in rate structure. Our organization, the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, the Tennessee Solar Energy Industries Association, TNSEA, and the Tennessee Small Business Alliance. This is the diverse coalition. We are modeling this off of a very successful effort that we ran over the last few years in the state of Florida, where we were able to do work to open the market and create a better debate and understanding and knock down some market barriers where monopoly power was trying to control the market, and they were using techniques that were misleading customers, and we were able to use ballot initiatives and consumer education and both social and traditional media to help really open the market in Florida. And we had some very powerful forces allied against us, and we work in a very broad coalition to overcome those barriers. It is important that this be a multi-partisan, that it doesn't get labeled as an entity that is either too far to the right or too far to the left, that has business interest at mind, and that as we grow this coalition, we want to make sure that we maintain those important balances. So this is this formulation when we launch this is carefully considered, and these are the original partners that will be visible in the launch. Next slide. So let me turn it over to Allie to talk a little bit about building the grassroots support.
Hey, Steve, I think you have a few more slides and then turn it back to me.
Okay. Because why don't we, so I'm looking at the petition to build the grassroots support. Why don't we advance to the next one? Is that where we're talking about the rate design? Okay, here's some of the policy asks. So let's focus on this for a second. So one of the things that we're already beginning to see, we're already seeing trends by the Tennessee Valley Authority and to some degree by some of their local power companies where they are discussing dropping the fair value for self-generation and generation that is happening both by customers who have put solar on their rooftops or businesses that have put solar on their rooftops and wanting to lower the exchange rate. Many people have heard of things about net metering and others. TVA doesn't have net metering. They have what's called a buy-all, sell-all agreement, but effectively, if they're not providing you the same rate that you're paying for, then what they're doing is they're undercutting the value of the electricity that you're putting on the grid. We've gone through some very deliberative conversations with them, and now it appears that they are poised to drop that rate below retail, which means effectively that they're going to move into the camp of a utility and the local power companies that go along with this into a camp that is overtly hostile to self-generation, and they are not going to be paying fair market value for the power that is being generated. This is a great concern that we anticipate they're going to unload on us here pretty soon. We want to make sure that businesses have access to solar power in a way, and Brian had referenced the fact that the Retail Industry Leaders Association had basically identified that Tennessee has a very poor suite of policies and ranks at the bottom. And so there's a number of companies in Tennessee that are looking to expand their ability to use solar, and TVA and potentially some of the local power companies are conspiring to figure out ways to undercut the economic value proposition for that and trying to limit that from happening. We are supportive of the local power companies that are visionary and want to actually provide what they were formed for in the first place, which is to serve the public interest, to be able to use and have the flexibility to generate their own power and initiate policies on their own system where they're not held under the thumb of TVA through these all requirements contracts that limit their ability to be able to have freedom. We think that is an important goal and metric that should be encouraged. We want to support TVA where they are expanding utility scale solar that they own and operate and are sharing throughout the system, because it is some of the most cost-effective price points. But we're not going to let TVA eyewash and pretend that the numbers that they're putting on the scoreboard for a utility their size are really credible when compared to their peers, both in the Southeast region and across the country. And that was why some of the slides that Brian shared. So we want to make sure that if TVA is going to play in this space, and they need to be in a leadership position and not be overrating what limited things that they're doing. And we're going to basically be sure that we push for rates that do not impede solar development in the TVA service territory. And this is one of the really key aspects of what we think we're going to be up against, or we are up against right out of the gates. Let me move to the next slide. So what is happening right now is that there have been a series of secret behind closed door meetings that have been going on between the Tennessee Valley Authority and industrial customers that they serve and they represent. The Tennessee Valley Industrial Committee, or TVIC, has been having a series of secret closed door meetings that are only accessible to them and the leadership at TVA about restructuring rates to where they're shifting more and more of the rate cost from the industrial customers onto the residential customer. We're also seeing that TVA is in secret negotiations with a number of the local power companies to also restructure the rates in a way that is going to put more and more fixed charges on customers' bills that are non-bypassable, so that what they're doing is before you ever turn the lights on, they are going to basically use monopoly power to force you to have to pay for the service, even though you're not getting anything at that point. And this can be done to a limited extent to basically cover some really basic charges. But what we anticipate is going to happen is they're going to take this to a whole nother level. And what they're doing is they are intentionally doing this to disincentivize the ability for people to do two very important things to manage their bills. One is going to be to self-generate using solar power as a way to lower their bill. The other is to do energy efficiency investments, because if you're putting more and more of the bill on the fixed charge, if you manage your energy usage through energy efficiency or you're self-generating, this is a very devious and calculated plot to try to thwart and undermine the technological innovation that is sweeping the country with energy efficiency and with solar. And so this is an intentional move by the Tennessee Valley Authority, and it looks like a number of the local power companies are basically going to go along with this. TVA has a plan to bring this before their board of directors in mid-February of 2018 and jam this through and down the throats of all the citizens, and they're not even talking about this or revealing the details publicly. They're still doing these secret negotiations. And this is democracy at its worst, it is public power at its worst, and it is a fundamental assault and attack on the basic mechanisms that allow us to be able to control our bills. It's discriminatory against low-income customers, and it will absolutely kill additional movement in both energy efficiency and in the solar space. This is a clear and present danger that we are highly focused on, and you will be hearing a lot more about it. But this is monopoly behavior at its worst. Next slide. So I'll hand it over to Allie now. I think this is the proper transition point.
It is this time. Thanks so much, Steve. And hello, everyone. My name is Allie Brown. I'm the advocacy manager at SACE, and helping to lead the grassroots movement we have in place for this campaign. So I'm going to talk a little bit in the next couple of slides about our volunteer efforts with Tennesseans for Solar Choice. We believe that the most effective way to make change in Tennessee and open up the solar market is through grassroots support. We've seen from experience that people power has a lot of influence if we do it right. And as customers, we have to stand together to put pressure on our local power companies and TVA to tell them that we want more solar power and we really won't stand for the status quo. We've been so pleased with the interest thus far from Tennesseans that are signing the petition and signing up to volunteer. There was a slide earlier about the petition, and it's likely that many of you all got on this call and got kind of pulled into the campaign because of that petition. We're using it to start educating, building support, and getting people involved. And in just a few months, just to give you some numbers, we've had nearly 1,000 people sign the petition online, and 200 people indicate that they want to get more involved and volunteer. And this is all before the official launch of the campaign. So I've been really pleased with this. We've been talking to folks all across the state, likely some of you on the call right now that I've had conversations with. And what I'm generally gathering is that folks are frustrated, they're hungry for change, and they really want to get involved locally. So next slide, please. So after hearing about some of these issues that we're facing from Steve and Brian and the barriers to solar power in Tennessee, I'm sure many of you are pumped up, I know that I am, and are wondering what you can do to help us create this change right now. So the first way we're asking folks to help get involved is to help us call other people that are signing the petition to learn more about them. You heard me mention earlier how many people are signing the petition and signing up to volunteer. That number is growing tremendously every day. It's a great problem to have, but we need help making contact with those folks to inform them about the campaign and see if they can help us get involved locally. So we already have a handful of volunteers helping out, and if you're interested in making phone calls, I'd really love to know that and get you trained on how to do that. We'll be sending out a survey after the webinar, so you can let me know if this is a way that you want to help us out. Oh, and I do want to give a shout out to our intern Carl, volunteers Mike and Nancy, who have already helped us make phone calls so far and helped let other people know about this webinar. So if they're on this call, I just want to let them know that we really do appreciate their help and support. The second thing that you can do right after the call, which will take just probably less than a minute, is to spread the word by sharing the petition. You can see on the left-hand side, there's a Facebook post that looks very similar to this one. Just go to our Facebook page, type in Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and please, the first post there should be a post promoting the petition, so you can click on it if you haven't seen it already. please share the post, tag your friends, any way you can get more people to sign the petition and get them involved locally. And if you're not on social media, we'll plan to also send the link out and of the petition and encourage you to follow up via email and forward it to your family and friends. So next slide. So Steve spoke to this earlier, but as we said, the TVA board meeting is in a few weeks, and it's going to be our first real opportunity as a coalition to stand up and speak about the issues that are threatening solar power from really expanding in our state. This issue is a huge threat to solar power, and we want to make sure TVA hears us. It'll be a good chance to communicate directly with the board members and raise this red flag that Steve was talking about earlier. I don't think TVA will really be expecting to see this, and it's time to show them that we're here and we're paying attention. As you can see, the board meeting is November 9th in Pickwick Landing. That's about 120 miles east of Memphis. We don't quite yet have the time, but we assume it will be around 9 a.m. So we're looking for some superstar volunteers to join us at this hearing and speak during the public comment section, which is always at the beginning. Each speaker gets about 3 minutes to address the board. So if you're interested, we'll be sending something out. Please let me know. I will work with you on talking points, help provide transportation. If you live in Memphis, we have a group that is carpooling together, so I can connect you with folks there. So again, I'll be sending something out, but please let us know if that's something that you're interested in participating in. Next slide. So if you can't make it to the board meeting or it's too far away, there will be many more opportunities coming up in the next few months. And I do want to emphasize that these efforts I'm going to mention are still in the works, but I want to paint a picture for you on how we expect the grassroots work to kind of evolve, and definitely welcome your thoughts and ideas as well. So the first is through a solar education, and that's something that you can start doing right now. One of the first steps to educating our community is educating our community about the benefits of solar and really beginning to use it. I know you heard earlier that there are many policy barriers to solar, but we know that another huge issue is just a lack of knowledge about the benefits of it. So we don't always find that these power companies are doing a great job of giving us that education, so we have to really help one another. And we'll be incorporating that into this campaign, but it only works if you help us spread the word. And, also educating people about those policy barriers that we learned about earlier in this presentation. The next thing, over the next coming months, we're going to be working to put grassroots pressure on TVA and our local power companies to make significant commitments to renewable energy. So look out for action alerts from us on how to contact these local power companies and TVA around these issues. But we also encourage you to be proactive and do this on your own. Do a little bit of research about your local power company and how you can engage locally. And then, similar to what we're doing at the TVA board meeting in a couple of weeks, we're looking to do this locally with our local power companies and form some active teams to attend the meetings and speak up during the public comment opportunities. We're already identifying some of the meetings. They tend to happen monthly, and want to create some local groups to attend and speak. The last couple of things are writing letters to the editor, being a social media advocate. We want to identify volunteers who want to take these actions. And, if you're interested in writing an LTE, we can help you with talking points. So next slide. So we wanted to make sure that we provided a lot of time for questions. And I really do want to emphasize that this campaign is just beginning. We're going to rely on folks like you to help shape it. And we're looking to you for feedback and ideas as we move forward. My email is right here. It's Allie, A-L-L-I-E, @cleanenergy.org. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and definitely look out for a quick form from me that will come out after this webinar where you can fill out how you particularly want to get involved. And with that, I'll send it back to Alyssa with questions.
Thank you, Allie. And we do have a few questions that have already been sent in that we'll get started answering, but I wanted to remind you, and you should see it on your screen there, if you think of a question that you would like to ask, you can simply click the blue question mark and then type in your question. So the very first question is, if I'm interested in making phone calls, do I need to use a special phone, or can I use my own phone, like a cell phone? Allie, can you take that one?
Yeah, great question. You can use your own cell phone. We have a great system that I'll give you a quick training on that will be on your computer. It's a very easy to follow script. So you can definitely use your own phone and you can make phone calls from home. But we do encourage people to get together and make phone calls as a group because it's always fun to do it like that.
Great. This next question I think is probably best for Brian. Was Tennessee ranked higher by RILA earlier in this decade? If so, by how much? If you have that information at your fingertips.
Yeah, thanks. I actually saw that question come through too, and I was trying to reply to it online, and I couldn't get it to take. But the short answer is I believe that this is the only time that RILA has done this. The Corporate Clean Energy Procurement Index, as it was called, was just published at the beginning of this year, back in January, and I don't think they had done a similar exercise to give us a basis for comparison.
Okay, great. Next question is probably best for Steve. So in a growing coalition, could Tennessee Farm Bureau join? And maybe if you want to just talk about a little bit how you see this coalition growing and developing in general, Steve, that might be helpful.
Yeah, so I think absolutely we want to have the broadest, most diverse coalition we can. And I think the Farm Bureau would be a great ally to potentially involve, because there are tremendous opportunities for farmers and landowners to not only harvest the traditional crops we think of, but actually harvesting the sun as a money-making opportunity for farmers to help their bottom line and diversify their overall portfolio on the farm is both smart and critically important. So, and the beauty of the Farm Bureau would also be that we want to make sure that we don't get too, for lack of a better term, top heavy in any one direction with, say, just only businesses where everybody just thinks, oh, these guys are only looking out for themselves, or too many environmental groups where it's just, oh, there's just, the usual suspects crying about the environment. We want this to be as diverse as possible, so we're going to try to manage the growth in an intelligent way, but we will immediately start working with everybody and anybody who is serious about removing market barriers and becoming part of a team. We have a lot of good technical background and understanding of what it's going to take to right some of these market barriers, and so we would look forward to that. In our situation in Florida, we went from approximately 5 organizations to several hundred over the course of the multi-year campaign. And let me be very clear, Rome was not built overnight, and we're not going to fix this problem overnight. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And anyone who knows about our organization and a lot of the other organizations that are going to be part of this, these organizations are not going away. We've got to be thinking about this as a long, sustainable campaign. And so this is not something that is going to move easy overnight. TVA, on this very destructive strategic rate review that they're doing, they are ahead of us because they've been having these secret meetings. They were representing to some of us who they claim were their stakeholders and that they were really, very interested in being partners with. They kept us in the dark about a lot of this stuff, and they kept telling us that, oh, we're committed to working with renewables and working in the new utility marketplace and everything. But at that same time, they were meeting behind closed doors, and they were actually mounting a very destructive set of policies that they were keeping out of the public domain. So they've got a little bit of a lead on us on this thing, but there's power in the people, and I am a very firm believer that once people understand what's going on, we can turn the tide on this. But it's going to take time, and it's going to be a hard-fought battle because there's some really archaic, old-school thinking that is still alive and well. And if you think about it, folks in the utility industry are usually not the most innovative people in the world. They tend to be not the early adopters to looking at new technology and really advancing it. They tend to like to stay in old school ways of thinking. So we've got a challenge ahead of us. but I would welcome anybody and everybody that is serious about removing the market barriers.
Great. This next question is probably for you as well, Steve. Is there any pressure you would put on TVA to join an ISO/RTO?
Well, let me tell you this. The Tennessee Valley Authority was originally conceived in the 1930s. I have always been a big champion and supporter of the concept of public power because in its truest form, it is a power that is being owned and served by the people. Unfortunately, public power in the most recent times has become increasingly corrupted to where it's a bunch of largely good old boys who are mainly interested in self-preservation and not necessarily interested in what is in the long-term best interest. And so TVA being a federal monopoly and actually controlling both through the all requirements contracts and all other aspects of this is, I think, a likely target for a very robust conversation about what is the proper role for TVA, and should we be thinking about more competitive markets? Should we be thinking about independent system operators, which is the ISO, or a regional transmission operator, which is the RTO concept? I believe that from our allies and a number of us who are thinking about what really are the advantages of competitive markets, it is certainly jet fuel and red meat for the conservatives. And I believe that it is high time that if TVA is going to act like a typical investor-owned utility monopoly like we've dealt with in other parts, it may be very much time for us to have a very robust, thoughtful conversation about what competition looks like in Tennessee. And this election cycle may be a very interesting time to start having those kind of conversations.
Okay, next question for you again, Steve. Since TVA's declining block rate proposal attacks energy efficiency most, can you bring in energy efficiency companies or trade groups as part of the coalition?
I believe that there is, beyond even the solar community, the opportunity to have a very robust conversation about this rate design, the secret proposal they're working on. And yes, I think that the other industry that is hurt is all the new technology that is coming out on energy efficiency that is so helpful for people being able to control their bills. And the fact that TVA and potentially the LPCs is conspiring to put more and more and more of this on the fixed charge component is an absolute impediment to people being able to control and manage, use these new technologies to lower their bills, and particularly for low-income customers who have extraordinarily high energy burdens in some of the marketplaces in our region here. For them to be loaded up with more fixed charges is criminal. It's literally criminal in my mind. It is unethical, and it is just sad that this is being contemplated. So yes, I believe there is a whole robust set of other players that don't come at this through the solar lens that are going to, as we begin to understand and we begin to see this nefarious rate plot unfold in the Tennessee Valley, are going to be absolutely enraged by it and will join and work with us in many different ways.
This next question may be best for Brian, but Steve, you may also want to chime in. Some electric power co-ops in other parts of the country have been installing lots of community solar projects with great success. Can we find data on how that may be lowering ratepayer costs?
Yeah, well, that's a good observation that was shared, I guess, by the questioner. Steve had mentioned earlier that from a SACE standpoint, we want to see all market segments of solar succeeding together. So that's residential rooftop, commercial and industrial segment. community scale solar as well as utility scale solar. And so there is a role for community solar projects. They're implemented in different ways. So I don't have information right at the top of my head on which ones do most effectively benefit the system where it's installed. But we can do a little bit of research in that. They do have some pilot projects for community scale solar that have been implemented within the TVA region recently. So it'll be interesting to observe those as well and see, number one, what the interest level is, the future pricing of those. We've actually had one, I'm based in Georgia, and we had one introduced here that has ridiculously high cost. It doesn't make sense. But we'll be observing all those throughout the Southeast region as they emerge.
And let me add to that, it's a very good question, and community solar is such a broad term, and there are so many different ways that community solar can get applied in various communities. The operative and most fundamental thing that has to be part of the equation is, where are the benefits flowing? Are they flowing back to the customer, and are the customers being treated fairly in the way these are configured, or are they flowing more to the utility, and is the utility constraining the way they're configured? So community solar is a very rich and robust topic of discussion, because there are a lot of people who either can't afford, or their house isn't orientated right, or they've got tree blockage, or they may be in apartments. There's lots of reasons why a really smart community solar program can be successful, but there's also a lot of ways that it can be configured in a way that make it just really eyewash and nothing more than a ploy to pretend that a local power company or a utility is really dedicated, but they've actually structured in such a way that it really doesn't help the customer. So the devil is in the details.
Great. Our next question is for you, Steve. Any insight on the terms for the GPP plan for 2018? How will it differ from 2017 in allocation, size, and compensation?
Well, this is what has been so frustrating and what is so destructive about what TVA has been doing for the last multiple of years. They wait until the last moment so that solar installers and people who are in the field trying to actually run a business don't understand the rules of the road. They change the rules of the road. They do all kinds of things to impede the uptake of solar. We do not know yet what 2018 is going to look like. But all you have to do, and we've gotten secret documents that have been passed around, that have been leaked to us. We are now FOIAing them so that TVA will have to release them publicly, and they need to be visible to people. The rate structure that they are going after absolutely anticipates that they're going to take the payment below retail, and that they're going to drive more and more cost onto the fixed side of a customer's bill, so that it is a direct impediment economically to self-generation, interfering with behind the meter, which is where people are able to reap the benefits from their investment. And these types of activities, I guarantee you, are coming. The question is the speed of the rollout. And as TVA and the LPC start to see this movement that we're building growing, they may try to sort of put sweeteners onto things, and they're going to try to mislead the public. So exactly what happens, but I can tell you the solar installers that I've talked to and are members of the Tennessee Solar Energy Industries Association are extraordinarily frustrated with the fact that there is a lack of a long-term commitment by TVA to see these markets flourish and move. They have been jerked around, whipsawed over and over and over again to the point that it has become almost impossible to transact. And that is why you are seeing these really bad numbers going up on the scoreboard. And that is why when Brian showed those numbers, you're seeing TVA flattening out, and you're seeing the rest of the region moving forward very aggressively, and the state of Tennessee being left behind, and our customers being held hostage by a federal monopoly that does not have the long-term best interest of the customers in the region in mind.
Our next question is a little bit technical, probably for you, Steve, possibly Brian. Can munis offer demand response and solar net metering? Wouldn't they be buying less from TVA in the end and have a savings by offering these programs and then be able to pass it on to their customers?
It is a concept to be proven whether we can find local power company partners that are willing to push back against this extraordinarily regressive all requirements contract to allow them to have the flexibility to look at rate structures that can actually benefit them as an entity in the local power company and their customers. That is the gold standard. What would be absolutely a positive development is to find some of the local power companies that really have the backbone to look out for their customers' interests, be willing to buck the TVA dominant paradigm, be willing to challenge under their contract to be able to really innovate in smart ways that are good for them on how they manage their distribution network and good for customers, and embrace the change. Let me just be very, very clear. TVA and the local power companies are not going to be able to keep the waves off the beach. This technology is coming. It is going to be a question about whether they embrace it and work with it and use it in a way that helps everybody, or whether they try to go back to an antiquated approach to rate making and try to hold their customers hostage through monopoly behavior that limits this kind of innovation. This question has some very interesting aspects to it. Again, the devil's in the details, but this is the kind of innovative thinking that we need to be seeing happening, and this strategic rate review and what we've seen in the secret documents that they have been having in these closed-door meetings does not embrace innovation and does not embrace the technology. It actually is an impediment.
This next one is less of a question, more of a comment that I think you could respond to, and that's one of the issues with renewable projects is no price certainty in the TVA market area. So, Steve, what would your response be to the uncertainty of price?
Well, I mean, again, I think that what we believe is that if we had more and more open markets and we had more and more transparency in how rate structure is done through things like cost of service, through unbundling various what are called ancillary services, and we had that kind of real visibility, and we're using things like time of use rates, which actually send the right market signals, I think that we can allow solar to thrive because it is an important tool and piece, and the price points are likely to continue to go down. And as they continue to go down, now again, let me be very clear, anybody that's following the solar market knows that there are two ITCs. There's the International Trade Commission and what could potentially happen with tariffs on panels, and then there's the investment tax credit. These types of incentives are part of the overall economics, but people, let me assure you that over time, solar is going to continue to decline in price unless there are artificial market barriers that are put into place. And so I believe that having the ability to have transparent, unbundled, innovative rate design will send the proper market signal that will not only help solar, but it will help things like storage, electric vehicles, more energy efficiency. This is the technology innovation that is coming, and these are the waves that TVA and the local power companies are not going to be able to keep off the beach. And this strategic rate review will be a failed attempt to block technology innovation.
Great, and we do have a few more questions here, and we do have a few more minutes as well. So if you have another question, we do have a few more minutes if you want to go ahead and submit that. But our next question actually is for Allie. What topics should I cover in a letter to the editor, and who do I submit it to?
Great question. You know, it's obviously going to depend locally and where you are, but we want to help you with your messaging, and but also let you use your own voice. We can help you locate the right newspaper to submit it to. We have a great communication staff that wants to assist you. But it's a great question, and I can't emphasize enough how helpful these LTEs are to show local pressure and interest. And also that I'll say that we can share them in so many different ways. If you have a great letter to the editor that's submitted, we will definitely be sharing it on our social media platforms as a way to get other people to read it that might not be picking up the newspaper that way. So thanks so much for the question.
Great. Our next question here is for Steve. How about pushing for some of this to go through an expanded PSC or PUC in Tennessee?
Well, this is what is so insidious about the Tennessee, the TVA structure, is it is a federal monopoly corporation that is not subject to regulatory oversight by a traditional state public service commission or public utility commission. There is a Tennessee regulatory agency, but it has never had the ability, nor am I aware of how it could be structured to provide the proper regulatory oversight over the TVA. That's not to say that it's not an interesting question, and I think that it's something that I think we need to approach this campaign with all options are on the table. And I think we're going to find through the diversity of the coalition and the different approaches that a number of the people are going to come to, we're going to see a lot of different ways of thinking about correcting this problem. But it's an interesting concept. But again, my experience with the Tennessee Regulatory Agency is that the TRA folks is that they don't have the motivation or the current configurated power to do that. Could we empower them? Interesting question.
Great, and that about brings us to the end of the webinar today. Hopefully everybody's questions were answered. If you do think of a question that maybe didn't come to your mind during the webinar, but you want to follow up later, again, maybe if we can go to the last slide that has Allie's email address on it, you can always email Allie directly, there it is, at ALLIE@cleanenergy.org. And I also noticed that we had a few people raising their hands about possibly getting involved, joining the coalition. We did note that, so we saw your comments there. And again, also feel free to go to, and please go to our Facebook page at Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and you'll be able to see the link to the petition right there. We will be sending follow-up materials as well, so you'll be able to have all those links and materials to be able to share with your friends and family, coworkers, anybody who cares about this issue. As Steve was saying, it's a very important issue, and it requires all of us working together. So thank you again for your time today. We have a lot of important and exciting work ahead of us, and we will be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.